each of the panelists to address your questions. And we have microphones which will give it to you. Just raise your hand. Amy.
And this has worked. I mean, Japan basically said to every company, you must report to the Japanese people what you cost through your environmental practices. And Japanese companies have put numbers, monetary figures, on the benefit and the cost of their behavior for decades now. It's perfectly simple if you take a philosophical approach and say, you know, you're a member of Japan society, tell us what you cost us, or on the gas that you make benefit to us, put that in monetary terms. We could be doing that across the board. It's a matter of taking a philosophical approach.
I would also want to say, some examples. I mean, obviously, CalPERS and CalSTRS have sometimes a different culture. They're very large, but they very often will be looking from a strategic standpoint very long term. I'm not saying every investment policy that they have is long term, but I know that when looking at the U.S., they're a little bit out there. But what you regularly see is that whether it's a recommendation from the staff, but more from the trustees, they look at things, they put $500 million aside, they do some practice. I mean, for them, $500 million is let's go see how that works. But that's how they looked at climate change, that's how they looked at greater diversity of asset managers, and also greater diversity of owners of the companies. But maybe that's a core practice that we could be encouraging across funds of, have you done the work to invite people in and talk about where the fund needs to go in the future, and have you put some money in place so you have, you know, your perspective of actually seeing how it goes. It has, in a number of ways, and PERS are very different culturally. They've taken the information and sometimes completely revised how they looked at it. They just finished a lot of work on infrastructure. And in fact, I work with the legislature, but we're looking at the CalPERS work on infrastructure, and we'll be holding a hearing in Calexico, which is near the border with Mexico, to actually review their work. So it gives us something to look at. That's a way to kind of open it up to the economy more broadly, and to kind of see a longer term vision, I think.
There's the first question in the fourth row.
Hi, I'm Sam Adams from Dimensional Fund Advisors. My question for the panel is, what's the individual investor's primary motivation for investing in this manner? Is it higher expected returns? Is it lower risk? Is it being a good citizen? Is it expressing their values? I imagine it's a combination of all those, but I'd like your perspective on what's the most compelling drivers of those or others that we should be looking at.
Is there somebody special who should answer the question?
Start with Amy.
Yeah, we certainly have more of a rush to our door when we have top ratings on Morningstar than when it's less than the top rating. I think that there's a segment of the population that's almost chasing last year's best performance, and we certainly have benefited from that over time. But when we survey our investors, the primary, if you want to put it in one big blob, the primary source is a friend or family, and the primary reason is they like what we're doing. And if you drill down farther on that, most of them say they don't know what we're doing, but they like what we're doing. They trust us because they think we're trying to do something to make the world better. That's the primary driver. I've had people sell and write a letter saying, I had no idea. I thought you were a Catholic fund. You know? but by and large, I think they understand that we're doing battle for them, and we're helping them have a bigger voice in the world. We get far more hits on our activism pages and our social impact pages than we get on our performance pages.
Are there other questions for the... Yes?
name is Frank Wetlaufen from Bank Saracen. I have a question, whoever wants to answer it. It's regarding a proposal of a regulation. What do you think of the idea that profits of the executive committees should be based on the profit which the company makes in 5 years' time or 7 years' time? So just to have this long-term incentive. And is it feasible?
I can take that because I've been looking at the deferred compensation as one of the key themes and drivers to try and move companies and institutions away from the short-term orientation. I think that if you think about it, for instance, in financial institutions, and be they funds or be they banks, whatever aspect of the financial institutions, one of the big things is we have turned compensation schemes into sort of like sales management incentive schemes that are very, very short-term. So the name of the game was to run away faster than the results, the outcome of your activities. And so to outrun that so that you would get out of the way before the wave came. So the whole thing is to make sure that people do things in a way that they're willing to avoid the wave. They're not created in the first place, but that they're compensated like that. So I totally agree. I think that the compensation has to be, or a significant part of the compensation in these institutions, which are supposed to have longer-term objectives, does require longer-term payout. So people have to be able to stay long enough to suffer or endure the consequences of their actions, positive or negative.
I would say I agree also, but funds need to also do that. And in fact, PERS does that, and they do it under a civil service government process, but the investment staff's bonuses go out many years and are calculated over time. So I think it's really a practice that needs to be expanded so that everybody is kind of in the same type of, so what you're recommending and how they do should be over time, and what you yourselves are doing over time.
There's another question.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Monchen, Access to Medicine Index. Pavan said in the introduction we have a lot of leaders, but not much followers. So the question is, how do we influence companies most effectively? And I strongly believe in sustainability indexes and ratings and rankings. So I would like to know somebody in the panel who has a vision on how we can most effectively influence companies with rankings or ratings.
Okay, you know, the SRI indices were probably 10 years ago. When you look back, Eni, of course, was the very first one to launch an index in 1990. Afterwards, you had the SAM index, you had the VGO index, you had the main index, e-capital partners, a lot of indices. You still now have some new indices, thematic or not. We know, by experience, we know that only maybe 3 or 4 of them maximum have an influence on companies. They look at it, they want to, see the feedback, they want to see if they have, make some progress. I was in a bank, I will not quote the name, but I was in a bank where, honestly, the top management didn't care at all. It was just a nice thing to have for the sustainable committee, much lower in the hierarchy of the company. So, at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is definitely tough questions asked by big asset managers at CEO or chairman level. If you mainly ask questions at CSR, deputy IR officer, that's nice. People will talk, they try to make the best, but honestly, it's going to take a lot of time. So a big name, talking to a big guy, is honestly the best way to influence things. Ranking is nice, but it's really nice. Honestly, my opinion.
Hi, Martin Rappaport from Rappaport Group. It looks like we have a major problem here evaluating externalities. And it also looks like we have a problem with long-term versus short-term, since the problems of externalities are long-term and related to short-term. And so, like, if you're investing, Wayne Gretzky is a hockey player. He says, why are you a great hockey player? He says, why go where the puck is going to go? Looks like people make money by anticipating change and buying those things that are going to be worth more and selling those things that are going to be worth less. So we know that externalities are going to affect certain companies.